Afternoon, gentlemen, and let's move on to our Guyana panel. Minister Bharrat, thank you so much for joining us. Kevin Ramnerine, the same in Port of Spain. Today, we're very fortunate to have this panel to discuss Guyana with the Minister of Natural Resources, with scarcely 2 months in office. So we will try to be kind, but don't expect quite too much. I'd just like to introduce you, sir. You have a background in education and information technology, which I think is going to will serve you quite well in your new role. When I was with Kevin in Guyana last year, we had the opportunity to meet several people that work in your government, all absolutely fantastic and brilliant, and all I think recognize that you have quite a vertical learning curve with such rapid growth in your energy sector. So I wish you well on that, absolutely. You've also been a technical officer and advisor in the Guyanese Ministries of Local Government and Health. So you've got some wonderful experience in government and leadership there, and we are really thrilled to have you leading the natural resources in Guyana. And then I'll introduce my good friend and colleague, Kevin Ramnerine, former Minister of Energy of Trinidad and Tobago. He held that role from 2011 to 2015. Kevin's been spending a great amount of time in Guyana over the last 3 years. He's very familiar with the developments of the oil sector, and he has just been appointed to the Local Content Committee of the Government of Guyana, and he is advisor to our guest, the minister. And then, of course, Kevin is a senior consultant at IPD Latin America, and I've had the great pleasure of working with him on a number of projects in Trinidad and Tobago and in Guyana. So welcome to you both, gentlemen. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
So Kevin, maybe we could just start off, since you're sort of the veteran minister here, and you've been working in Guyana now for several years. Maybe we could just start off and ask you to sort of frame the dimensions of the development of the oil industry in the country. Maybe take 5 minutes to do that, and then we'll get to our questions with the minister.
Okay, thank you, David. Guyana has been one of the biggest stories in the world of oil and gas in recent years. For the last 6 years, as we know, the oil industry has seen a lot of uncertainty centered generally around three main disruptors. And these are the first being the shale revolution, the second being decarbonization, and the third being the demand destruction created by COVID-19. In all that uncertainty, Guyana has emerged as an exploration hotspot of the world with an impressive string of discoveries by ExxonMobil and its partners, which has thus far yielded 8 billion barrels of oil equivalent in recoverable resources. It is my opinion that what Exxon has discovered is simply the tip of the iceberg in Guyana, and there's a lot more to be discovered, and there is a lot more exploration planned. Indeed, according to Woodmac, Guyana is on target to become the second largest producer of oil in South and Central America, second only to Brazil. On the other hand, on the other extreme, Guyana is one of the greenest nations in the world, with a jungle landscape that has inspired many great works of literature, including Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World. The interior of Guyana is one of the last untouched natural rainforest systems in the world. It is a treasure of biodiversity and a natural carbon sink. These are the extremes that currently present itself to the Guyanese government. On the one hand, how to develop a world-scale oil industry, and on the other hand, how to maintain Guyana's green credentials. These two scenarios are not mutually exclusive, but will require enlightened policy direction from the government of Guyana, which there's a new government in Guyana. It's now about 2 months old, and that government is led by one of the youngest presidents, one of the youngest heads of state in the Western Hemisphere and probably in the world, in the person of Dr. Mohammed Irfan Ali, who has thus far demonstrated a tremendous vision that speaks to those two extremes. On the one hand, the new oil industry, and on the other hand, the biodiversity and the green credentials of Guyana. So today, we welcome and we are honored to have with us the minister who is responsible for natural resources in Guyana. And I'm sure he will speak a bit about the policy direction of the government of Guyana in those regards. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Minister, I think we're all interested to hear a little bit about how you intend to structure the institutionality of the energy industry, and any thoughts you might have on environment, greenhouse gas emissions, etc. We had a panel earlier today on gas as a transition fuel. I think that you've got some major plans for natural gas in your power sector. Just really any sort of introductory comments you'd like to make. We'd certainly be interested to hear your vision of how you're going to carry out your strategy for the energy sector.
Thank you, David. Kevin as well too. Let me say that I'm happy to be on a part of this conference today. It's historic for us. It's the first virtual conference for us in Guyana. And Kevin is right, we are a new oil producing country. Our government is only 2 months old. Tomorrow will be exactly 2 months old. And we do have one of the youngest presidents leading us, as well as our vice president, who is a former president of 13 years in Guyana. That is Dr. Bharrat. I think the world knows him, the champion of the earth. He has been in the forefront, leading the climate change and the climate change issue. But for a country like Guyana, I would say that we are a blessed country with a small population, but a large amount of resources. As Kevin would have mentioned, and quite true, we would have the second largest oil deposit in South Central America, or I believe the entire hemisphere, Kevin, if I'm correct. That is something we will definitely explore, but I understand too that we need to look at renewables and how we move forward from that too. So for a country such as Guyana, which has had a long policy of environmentally being conscious and of course sustainable development, this is of course a great fortune of having over 8 billion oil equivalent barrels, which has been discovered in only the Stabroek block. That is only the Exxon, the Hess, and the CNOOC block outside of just offshore of Guyana. But there are several other blocks. We have the Kaichor block, we have the Kanji block, we have the Oranju block, where there are other explorations that are taking place. So we are very hopeful that in a short time from now, we will be able to have many more discoveries like the Liza 1 and Liza 2 developments. And only yesterday, we would have signed one of the largest single investment in the history of our country, with a $9 billion investment in the Payara development. That is the second production license agreement ever issued by our country. The first one being the Liza license, that's the Liza 1, Liza 2. So we are, as mentioned, David, we are on the cusp of becoming one of the great oil producers in this hemisphere. However, we still need to look at issues, for example, the global transition away from fossil fuels, which I know is one of the major issues that is being discussed worldwide. And how do we move away from fossils into renewable? Also, we need to look at too, as Guyana's focus on environmental sustainability, that is to reduce carbon footprint and of course encourage hydro, solar, and wind energy. The government of Guyana, of course, is aware of the need to have a holistic vision of how to efficiently and effectively utilize this resource while addressing, of course, these considerations. The opportunity to develop our petroleum sector, this will allow us to consider the lessons and experiences of the past. Now, the government is also committed to strengthening institutional capacity and also adopting a strong legislative and regulatory framework for the sustainable development of Guyana's natural resources, which, of course, as mentioned, we do have a lot of natural resources. But I agree with Kevin when he said that we have vast rainforests, untouched, pristine rainforests in Guyana. As a matter of fact, 87% of our land mass is covered by forests, which is quite a lot in comparison to many other countries around the world. And we are also happy to, because of the dynamics and the geography of our country, we have 10 regions, administrative regions. And in some of these regions, we will find the indigenous or the natives living in those regions. They are pretty much making use of renewable energy as we speak, and they've been doing so for a number of years. We have about, I would say, close to 80% of the indigenous communities utilizing solar energy and wind energy as of now, as we speak. So that is something that we are pushing, especially in our hinterland, as we call it, the hinterland communities. We are also looking at our sustainable forestry, the way we go about harvesting from our forests. Mining, however, has been an area that we need to focus a little bit more on, because as we know, mining is more devastating than logging. And we have had a few issues in the past. This is something that we are working, this new government will work to correct, because mining can have detrimental effect on our environment. Our government would have, of course, we came out of power in 2015. Prior to that, we would have been developing the Amila Falls Hydro Project, which would have definitely supply enough power for the entire Guyana to encourage also industrialization, and if possible to sell power to neighboring countries. However, that project was shelved by the previous administration, but we are going to put that project back on stream in 2021. So our focus, even though we become a large oil producing country, our focus is not only on fossils, but we will move ahead with our agenda with regards to renewable energy, especially solar in our hinterland regions, and also the Amila Falls Hydro Project. So basically that will bring us to a position where we can contribute or add to our carbon sink. I'm not sure if you follow the production license of Payara that we signed yesterday, where we had an issue with flaring. And I know that is a big issue in terms of the environmental risks that it poses. So we would have managed, which was missing from the LISA license agreement signed under the previous administration, we would have managed to place into that license heavy fines and penalties for flaring. Of course, we know, and Kevin would tell us too, with having more experience in the oil industry, that flaring cannot be stopped completely. During commissioning, during startup, during maintenance, you would have, we try to minimize the amount of flaring. But we cannot allow flaring to go on. It is detrimental to our environment. So we would have managed through the Environmental Protection Agency to have a fine placed in that contract for continuous flaring. And also from a government level to have another penalty imposed for the wastage of the gas, the natural gas. Because very soon, as a matter of fact, the President, His Excellency, Mr. Ali, Dr. Ali, has already started to set up a task force to work on the gas to energy project, which is another big project that will come on stream very soon for us. As a matter of fact, we're hoping to start that project sometime soon in 2021, so that we can utilize that gas to produce electricity, not only at a cheaper rate, which was promised to our people, but also a reliable source of electricity. So that is something that we'll definitely be working on in the new year, along with the Amilo Falls Hydro Project. So David, in a nutshell, those are some of our plans that we have on the table to ensure that we use or we utilize our new sector, that the oil and gas sector, to also foster developments in the renewable energies as well too. Thank you. I think you're mute. You're on mute.
David is muted. David,
Thank you
muted.
very much, guys. Thank you very much, Minister. You just pretty much answered all the questions that I had prepared for you. But no, I think that there's still a lot to talk about here. One of the things that we were talking about in our previous panel earlier today was clean barrels. And I think Guyana's reserves would clearly fall under this category with the 32-degree API. But what my colleagues in the United States were saying to me earlier as they were digesting the content of that panel is that we should be calling them transparent barrels, not green barrels, when we talk about the environment. So I know that that you're doing work with the World Bank and that you've got an endowment for the Resource Governance and Management Project. I wonder, does that project assist you in any way in sort of transparency and reporting with regards to your commitment to Paris, for example?
I'm happy that you asked that, David. Yes, we have a World Bank project that is ongoing, which of course fall into 4 components. Those components being the legal framework and the stakeholder engagement. The second component, of course, the capacity building of key institutions, and the third component, fiscal management and project management. Now, this is a $20 million project, of which we would have utilized close to about 4 million so far. However, we haven't managed, and I must admit, and I'm not being or playing politics. We are new. We are back in government after 5 years period, and development and production would have started under the previous administration. So basically, we are 2 months old into production, if I may say so. So there are a number of ways in which a number of projects that we have planned, in which we will utilize this World Bank, the funding from the World Bank, to ensure that yes, we live up to our expectation as a carbon sink. We have had previous projects, for example, the Red Plus project, which was funded by the EU, and also another World Bank project, also which would have assisted Guyana to ensure that we have sustainable management of our resources, and we will definitely utilize the World Bank funding to build capacity, because what you find is that education is important with regards to the sector. Not too much Guyanese, or not many Guyanese are au fait with how oil and gas function, what are the benefits, what are the detriments, and if we don't educate or build capacity, then you find that we may eventually be subscribing to the resource course and not gaining opportunities from it instead. So that is something that we will definitely, as a government, deal with at a policy level, as to how we utilize the World Bank project and the funding from it to ensure that we maintain our carbon sink, we maintain our reputation as the, if I may use the term, the oxygen of the world, because we have the capacity to do so, but it's just that we need to ensure that we harness all the resources, and of course to ensure that we have the technical capabilities and the legal framework as well to keep that intact so that we can continue to allow the world to breathe.
Good. David, if I may ask the Minister, Minister, we would like to hear your perspective on the policy going forward with regard to the institutions that will be developed by your government to oversee the sector. Could you tell us a bit about the Petroleum Commission and what's the time frame on that?
All right, thank you, Kevin. Yes, what we have present, the model that we have presently is that we have a Department of Energy, which falls directly under the Ministry of Natural Resources. And then we have a Petroleum Department, which is part of the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission, which also falls under the Ministry of Natural Resources. Those are two of the four agencies under the Ministry of Natural Resources. The other two being the Guyana Forestry Commission and the Guyana Goa Board. Now, our plan is to have what we term as the Petroleum Commission. Now, under in 2017, we would have had a Petroleum Commission bill tabled in the National Assembly. Now, I would have been a part of that, those members of Parliament who would have debated on that bill. And our position at that time was that the bill was giving too much powers to the Minister of Natural Resources, or the minister responsible for petroleum. So that was our argument in 2017. So it was sent to a special select committee, and unfortunately it was left there. Nothing much was done on it. Today we are in government, and I am the minister with responsibility to the petroleum sector, but I still hold the same view. Our government still holds the same view that the previous bill gives too much power to the minister. And we would like to depoliticize the oil and gas sector as much as possible so that there is little or no political interference in the day-to-day running of that sector. Because we would have campaigned and we would have promised the Guyanese people that there will be transparency and accountability in this sector. And this is something that has been lacking from the inception of production in Guyana, with the signing bonus not being declared to the taxpayers of Guyana. So we want to correct this situation and to depoliticize it. So we will be retabling the Petroleum Commission bill sometime before the ending of 2020. Of course, the revised Petroleum Commission bill, because we have our team, our legal team that is working on that Petroleum Commission bill, as well as we're getting some input from the Attorney General, who is integrally involved in that too. So we're hoping to table that bill sometime this year. Now, with the establishment of the Petroleum Commission, it means that the Department of Energy and the Petroleum Department at GGMC will be subsumed into this body. What we have to factor in too now, Kevin, and you're part of this discussion because you're part of the local content panel that has been tasked or appointed by the President to work on our local content policy and legislative framework, is to ensure that in the Petroleum Commission, there is some amount of regulations in terms of local content in Guyana. So to answer your question directly, yes, we'll be tabling the Petroleum Commission bill in a matter of weeks, and hopefully by mid next year latest that we can have that commission in place. Ideally, we'll be looking for early next year, but we're hoping that at least latest by mid next year, we'll have that Petroleum Commission in place that can manage this new emerging sector without political interference, that is.
Good. David, you have a question? David on mute.
David on mute.
Sorry, the traffic outside is a little loud today. We have several questions from the audience, and with just about 10 minutes or 12 minutes left, maybe I'll just start with some of these. There's one that's interesting. which asks, I guess, number one, if you plan to market your oil as low carbon, and then I guess the idea is to integrate that into CO2 agreements that you may have and try to get compensation. In this case, the question says, will you get compensation for planting mangroves, for example? And that made me think, would mangroves fall under your agreement with Norway for forestation? I don't know. And I'd like to also know if that agreement is still valid and if you're still moving forward to maintain your carbon sink status, and sort of what you think about that.
Yeah, well, David, the mangrove project, yes, it was a big success in Guyana, but unfortunately, the project was halted. I'm not sure, but it's something that I'll explore at cabinet level with colleague ministers and the president. But it's something definitely that we need to look at, being a country that is below sea level, and with climate change and rising sea levels, because we've already felt the impact of that on several occasions. We would have done extensive work in our mangrove, planting of mangroves at our seashores across the country. This is something that we will definitely be exploring. And the other issue with the emissions and oil and gas, what we are exploring too with Exxon, the operators, and it came up for discussion during the Payara negotiations, is to have compensation for carbon emission. However, it was agreed that it will not be included in the production license, which we agree with. That's okay. But there will be a separate conversation and a separate agreement that will start very soon, negotiation that will start very soon with these operators to ensure that we have some kind of compensation for carbon emission, because we will of course like to remain or to have that carbon sink in place, because we know the importance of it. Guyana, being a country under sea level, will know the effects of climate change. And we have all intentions of ensuring that we maintain that. Dr. Bharrat Jagdeo, as you will know, as the champion of the person who have been in the forefront, leading on climate change issues. He is the person who will be leading those negotiations, and I think he's the most fitting person to do so. And we're hoping to re-engage Norway as well too, to ensure that, of course, we look forward for some kind of rewards for saving the world, because I like to boast that we're contributing to saving the world. But of course, you would understand that our economy is not that strong. We're only now producing oil. As a matter of fact, we haven't spent not a dollar from our oil proceeds so far, even though we would have just passed a budget of 330 billion Guyana dollars. We haven't spent a single dollar from our oil proceeds. So we are still a country that would like to be rewarded, of course, for keeping our forests intact, for seeking, of course, we're seeking funding to have our mangrove project back, so that we can protect our shoreline, because that's our only defense actually from the sea. Our seawalls might be insufficient at some point in time. We've already seen that starting to happen with the rising sea level. So mangrove will definitely be reaching out for funding for that, taking into consideration that we have just started our production and we haven't used our resources as yet.
Kevin?
I just have, it's more of a comment I have, more of an observation. The government of Guyana has clearly taken a decision to utilize the associated natural gas being produced by Exxon to go to power, and that in itself is a step in the green direction, because currently the power in Guyana is generated by burning diesel and fuel oil. So this would be a lower carbon, a lower carbon type approach. But the other observation is that a lot of the CO2 emissions in Guyana come from the mining sector. And the mining sector uses a lot of diesel. In fact, I have been into the interior of Guyana, into the gold mines, and diesel is almost like the lifeblood of the mining sector. So, I mean, my question for the minister is that would it be possible to look at using some of that natural gas to convert it into liquefied natural gas, LNG, and then take that through the river systems into the interior and have that be made available to the mining sector for power generation within it? I'm talking here about the larger mining, the Aurora gold mines and so on. It's something I just wanted to throw out, and that has two impacts. One, it lowers the cost of mining, and two, it lowers the carbon footprint of the mining industry. I just wanted to get the minister's thoughts on that.
I agree with you, Kevin, that with our small population, we don't have a problem with the population, and CO2 is exactly what you would have mentioned. Mining, which we have a lot of challenges with presently, so we're trying to correct that. Yes, diesel is like a lifeline for them. You would see trucks and truckloads of diesel going into the interiors on a daily basis. So you're correct when you say that there's a large emission of CO2 by miners. But I like the proposal that you would have made, and I'm happy to say that there are several companies. Actually, Guyana seems to be the place to invest now, because in 2 months, I've met with so many investors. And one such investor is willing to do exactly what you would have said, Kevin, to liquefy the gas so that it can be used elsewhere. As a matter of fact, I'm meeting with them sometime later this month. They're coming in from different countries. So I'm happy that you raise it, because I can definitely explore it with them at that meeting. So we're open to suggestions, we're open to ideas, because we are new into oil and gas production. And Kevin, you would have far more experience in Trinidad and Tobago than us here. And of course, that's why the president saw it fit for you to be on that panel to assist us. Because Trinidad and Tobago, as you know, David, is our sister country, very close by to us. We've always shared a good relationship with Trinidad, and we are looking forward to being assisted, especially in the technical capabilities from Trinidad, and people like Kevin and others too. So thank you, Kevin. We will definitely explore that.
Minister, in the last 4 minutes, we do have several questions coming in with regards to the regulation of gas flaring. I think some people would like to know how that's being managed now through contracts, or whether you'll consider having an industry-wide regulation on flaring. What are your thoughts on where you're going to take that?
Yeah, yes, David. That is an issue that we're being faced with right now, because there is just one FPSO operating right now, and that's the Liza Destiny. Now, there is a problem experienced in that FPSO, which we're trying to correct as early as possible. I'm told that we should get it fixed, because that gas compressor was taken to Germany to fix, and it should be back in a couple of days. But to prevent these issues from happening, we've already engaged Exxon and the other investors that we need to correct these deficiencies, if it is a deficiency, on the future FPSOs, because we have a FPSO that will be sailing to Guyana later next year. That's for the Liza 2 development. And then the other year, we'll have the Prosperity FPSO coming, that is for the Payara development. So we have already engaged the companies to ensure that whatever deficiencies that we experience on the Liza Destiny, that it is corrected on the Liza Unity and Prosperity and any other future FPSOs that will be coming to offshore Guyana. Now, that is why we would have negotiated with the operators to ensure that we have some amount of control over flaring, because we can't just sit back and allow flaring to occur. So that is why we have managed to institute a fine and also penalty in the Payara production license that we issued last night. to Exxon, not only for the emission into the atmosphere, damaging our environment and having environmental effects or on the world, but also the wastage of gas, because we see that as wastage. Ideally, gas was Exxon would have agreed to re-inject gas into those wells, and then to bring some amount to shore so that we can set up a power plant, maybe producing 250 kilowatts, which will be sufficient for our population and additional for industrialization too. So we're happy that we would have managed to get those fines and penalties into the contract and to show that we are not going to stand by idly and allow flaring to happen and the destruction of our environment. And as time goes on, we'll be taking stronger stand, because as I mentioned earlier and several times, we want to maintain that strong carbon sink that we have. We have that reputation and we want to maintain that. I know a lot of people are concerned that now Guyana is an oil producing country, that we may move away from that. But I want to give you our commitment as a government and as a country that we will work to ensure that we maintain that status and to help to protect the environment at the same time too, to build on our renewable energy resources that we have. We will actually use the resources from the oil and gas sector to help in those areas. So yes, it is an issue right now, David, but I want to assure you and everyone else that we are working to address those issues and to ensure that it is minimized or stopped completely in the future FPSOs that are coming on board.
David on mute.
Here we go again, Minister. I know you have another meeting to get to, so I don't want to take up any more of your time. I want to thank you very much for joining us today at the Madrid Energy Conference. Kevin Ramnerine, thank you very much
David,
for coordinating this call. We really appreciate that. And with that, we will close the day. Tomorrow, we go from oil and gas back to renewables and energy transition on the tech side. So our first panel will be the Internet of Things and AI. We'll move on to emissions reduction and mitigation of CO2. And then our last panel of the day will be European advances in hydrogen. Don't miss tomorrow. We've got another fantastic live concert from Pablo Sáenz Villegas, who will be with us to close the conference. So we look forward to that as well. Minister Kevin, thank you very, very much. Have a good afternoon. And everyone else, have a good afternoon or good day as it would be.
Thank you, David.
Again, thank you very much, and good night, David.
Good night.